Rain pounded against my windshield so hard that night that I could barely see the road ahead, but nothing blurred my vision more than the sight of a young woman standing alone under a flickering bus stop light, clutching a little girl tightly against her chest. Her clothes were soaked, her face was pale, and her eyes carried the kind of fear people spend their entire lives trying to forget. When she stepped toward my car and whispered, "Can we stay here tonight?" I answered honestly, "I only have one bed." Before we continue, if you believe that kindness deserves a second chance and that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's destiny, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who still believes in humanity, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts for more stories that remind us why we should never stop caring. 3 years earlier, my life had looked very different. My name was Corin Vale, and I was 34 years old, living alone in a tiny rented house at the edge of a quiet town. It was the kind of place people overlooked because nothing remarkable ever happened there. The walls were old, the paint was peeling near the windows, and every time the wind blew hard enough, the roof made sounds that reminded me of distant thunder. But it was mine, at least for now. I worked as a furniture repairman in a small workshop downtown. I spent my days restoring broken tables, damaged chairs, and cabinets people thought were beyond saving. There was something strangely comforting about repairing things. Wood never lied. It showed every scar openly. If it cracked, you could see where it hurt. If it warped, you knew time and pressure had changed it. People were different. People smiled while carrying shattered hearts. People laughed while drowning inside. I knew that because I had once been married. My wife, Miri, had died in a traffic accident 5 years earlier. She had been driving home from visiting her mother when a truck lost control on a slippery highway. One ordinary afternoon had stolen every plan we had ever made. After her death, I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped celebrating birthdays. I stopped buying 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Eventually, loneliness stopped feeling painful. It simply became routine. I survived by working, eating simple meals, reading old books, and falling asleep in the same narrow bed every night. Then came that stormy evening. I had just finished delivering a repaired dresser to a customer in a neighboring village when the rain began pouring relentlessly. At first I noticed only the little girl. She looked no older than 6. She wore pink rain boots covered in mud and held a worn stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. Then I noticed the woman beside her. She couldn't have been more than 28. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks. Her lips trembled from cold. She kept looking over her shoulder as if she expected someone terrible to emerge from the darkness. I pulled over mostly because of the child. Rolling down the window, I asked if they needed help. The woman hesitated. Pride and desperation fought silently across her face. Finally she admitted that the last bus had already left and there were no hotels nearby. She had nowhere else to go. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for food. She only asked if they could stay somewhere dry until morning. I looked at them for several seconds. Then I looked at my own hands gripping the steering wheel. Those hands had spent years rebuilding broken furniture. But I wasn't sure they knew how to help broken people. "I only have one bed," I said quietly. The woman lowered her eyes. For a moment I thought she would walk away. Instead she smiled weakly. "We can sleep on the floor," she whispered. Something inside me shifted. Perhaps it was memory. Perhaps it was guilt. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that if Maris had ever been stranded somewhere with a child, I would pray someone would open their door. So I told them to get in. The little girl climbed into the back seat immediately. The woman sat beside her and thanked me at least 6 times during the short drive home. When we arrived, embarrassment washed over me. My house was clean but painfully modest. A small kitchen. 1 bathroom. 1 bedroom. A sofa that had survived better days. A dining table repaired so many times it looked like a patchwork quilt made of wood. I handed them dry towels. I found an old blanket inside the closet. I cooked tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches because it was all I had. The little girl devoured everything eagerly. The woman ate slowly, apologizing repeatedly. Eventually I learned their names. The mother was named Sereya Arden. Her daughter was named Miri. Miri spoke freely. Children always reveal truths adults desperately hide. She talked about her favorite cartoons. She talked about missing her school friends. She talked about moving from house to house. Then she innocently mentioned that her father became angry whenever he drank. Silence filled the room. Sereya looked down at her bowl. Her fingers tightened around the spoon. No further explanation was necessary. Later that night, I prepared the bedroom for them. I placed clean sheets on the bed. I gave Miri an extra pillow. Then I returned to the living room intending to sleep on the sofa. But around midnight I heard soft crying. I walked toward the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly open. Inside, Sereya sat beside the sleeping child. Moonlight filtered through the curtains. Tears streamed down her face. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. As though life had been asking too much from her for too long. She noticed me standing there. Immediately she wiped her eyes. People often apologize for crying. As though sadness is something shameful. She explained that she had finally left her husband after enduring years of insults, manipulation, and occasional violence. She had stayed because she believed he would change. She stayed because she wanted her daughter to have a father. She stayed because she had nowhere else to go. Until one night he smashed a plate against the wall inches away from Miri. That was the moment she packed a small bag and walked away. She had no plan. Only determination. Listening to her story reminded me how courage rarely feels heroic. Sometimes courage looks like a terrified woman carrying a child through heavy rain. The next morning I expected them to leave. Instead Sereya asked if she could stay another day while searching for work. Then another day passed. Then another. Soon she found a temporary position at a nearby bakery. Miri enrolled in a local elementary school. Weeks turned into months. Our strange little household developed routines. I woke up early to prepare breakfast. Sereya baked muffins she brought home from work. Miri filled the house with endless questions and laughter. For the first time in years, someone waited for me to return home. Someone asked how my day had been. Someone noticed when I seemed tired. Loneliness began loosening its grip. But happiness frightened me. Because happiness means risking loss. And loss had already taught me how cruel life could become. One evening I returned home earlier than usual. I found Miri sitting at the dining table drawing pictures. She proudly showed me one. It depicted 3 people holding hands beneath a large yellow sun. One figure had long hair. One figure was small. The third figure wore glasses. I wore glasses. "That's us," she said cheerfully. My throat tightened. Children create families long before adults allow themselves to believe in them. Months later, trouble arrived unexpectedly. Sereya's husband discovered where she lived. He appeared outside the bakery demanding she return home. When she refused, he threatened legal action. Threatened to take Miri away. Threatened to destroy everything she had rebuilt. Fear returned to her eyes. The same fear I had seen at the bus stop. She considered leaving town. She believed running away was easier than fighting. But I disagreed. People who survive storms deserve sunlight. People who escape cages deserve freedom. Together we contacted legal aid services. Neighbors who barely knew us offered support. Bakery customers donated money for attorney fees. Teachers wrote statements describing how much Miri had improved emotionally. For the first time, Sereya discovered she wasn't alone. Kindness spreads quietly, like candlelight moving from one flame to another. The court process lasted several months. It drained us financially, emotionally, mentally. But truth eventually prevailed. The judge granted Sereya full custody. Her former husband received supervised visitation rights contingent upon rehabilitation. When the decision was announced, Sereya cried openly. Not because she was weak. Because she was finally safe. That night we celebrated with inexpensive pizza and chocolate cake. Miri danced around the living room singing loudly. Sereya laughed harder than I had ever heard. And I realized something astonishing. I was laughing too. Truly laughing. Without guilt. Without pretending. Months later, on a bright afternoon filled with golden sunlight, Sereya handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a wooden picture frame. She had decorated it herself. Placed inside was Miri's drawing. The three figures still held hands. But now she had written words beneath them. My forever home. I stared at the drawing for several minutes. 5 years earlier I had believed my story ended when Maris died. I thought grief was the final chapter. I thought empty rooms would remain empty forever. But life writes surprising pages. Sometimes strangers appear during storms. Sometimes broken people save each other. Sometimes one narrow bed inside a small house becomes the beginning of an entirely new family. A year later, I asked Sereya to marry me beneath the old maple tree behind our home. She cried before I finished speaking. Miri screamed yes before her mother could answer. And for the first time in many years, I looked toward the future without fear. Because love had returned. Not in the way I expected. Not in the form I imagined. But perhaps that is what makes love extraordinary. It doesn't replace those we lost. It teaches us our hearts still have room to grow. Today our house remains small. The roof still rattles during storms. The dining table still carries scratches. But now there are school projects hanging on the refrigerator. There are birthday candles waiting to be blown out. There are family photographs covering the walls. And there are 3 toothbrushes standing side by side in the bathroom. Whenever heavy rain falls outside, I remember that night. I remember a frightened woman standing beneath a flickering light. I remember her asking if they could stay. And I remember answering honestly that I only had one bed. I never imagined that offering one bed would eventually give me an entire family. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts so more people can discover stories that remind us that compassion still exists. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act of mercy can completely transform someone's future, because somewhere tonight, someone may be standing in the rain, carrying nothing except fear, exhaustion, and a tiny spark of hope. And sometimes, all it takes to save a life is a door that opens, a warm bowl of soup, and a stranger willing to say, "Come inside." You don't have to face this storm alone anymore.